You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
All writers are prone to becoming so attached to our characters and stories that we struggle to see why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing to full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, shaping stories into masterpieces that can stand the test of time. Editing services are provided for all genres and all age categories. Services range from critiques of the short story through to the line edits of the full-length novel and copy editing for those preparing for publication. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites, as well as help with those book blurbs and promotional material. We won't abandon you to the masses. We want to celebrate with you in your successes. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services and prices, visit us at blackwolfeditorial.com.
Individuals and businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. Do you feel like you're losing control over your finances? If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, we can help you take back control. The IRS is the largest and most aggressive collection agency in the world, and they can seize your bank account, garnish your paycheck, close your business, and file criminal charges. Take control of your tax problems now by calling the experts at Tax Mediation Services and take advantage of the Fresh Start program and new laws that may allow us to negotiate a settlement for the lowest amount possible. Our team of tax attorneys and enrolled agents can stop collections and get you protected so you can take control of your financial future. Tax Mediation Services is accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Call now for a free case review and a price protection guaranteed quote.
Call Tax Mediation Services now at 800-610-9050. That's 800-610-9050. 800-610-9050.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it, there to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course, Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
Tired of paying outrageous prices for Viagra? Well, we have great news for you. Now you can finally get Viagra at huge discounts. Healthy Man allows you to save up to $500 on Viagra. Why pay U.S. pharmacy prices of $15 per pill or more when you can get Viagra for less than $3 a pill? Call today and get 40 Viagra pills for only $99. This can cost as much as $600 at your local pharmacy. You can't afford not to call us. If you want Viagra at the lowest prices, never pay $15 a pill pharmacy prices again. Get Viagra for less than $3 a pill. Call 1-800-516-7602 today and save up to $500 and get 40 pills for just $99. Healthy Man is fast, easy, and affordable. Operators are waiting at 1-800-516-7602 to take your call right now. Call 1-800-516-7602. That's 1-800-516-7602. Again, 1-800-516-7602.
From the East Coast to the West Coast and around the world on the Internet, we're coming to you live from the CCRS studios, WNJC 1360. This is the Conservative Commandos radio show with your host, Rick Trader. The Conservative Commandos radio show, where the newsmakers go to be heard. You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando radio show. of Independence for all the Munchkins and their descendants, if any. Yes, let the joyous news be spread. The wicked old witch at last is dead. Ding dong, the witch is dead. The witch is dead. The witch is dead. Ding dong, the wicked witch is dead. Ding dong, the witch is dead. Rub your eyes down then. Wake up, the wicked witch is dead. Ding dong,
welcome, everybody, and welcome, fellow patriots. Welcome, fellow deplorables. That's right, ding dong, the witch is dead, and hopefully we will never hear from Madam Secretary ever again. Welcome to the Conservative Commandos radio show. I'm Rick Trader, coming to you live from the studios of the Conservative Commandos radio network at WNJC 1360 in Philadelphia and around the world on the internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, AM, FM 24/7. And joining me today as my co-host today is the President and CEO of Frontiers of Freedom, the deplorable one, or also the deplorable one, George Landreth. George, welcome to the Conservative Commandos radio show.
Hello, it's a great day to be deplorable.
Indeed it is. It is. So, George, I mean, nothing ever happens in the news. That's right?
I know, it's a real problem. I mean, nothing happens. I'm not sure what we should talk about today. I suppose we could... I saw an interesting story, by the way. It was interesting that came out that yesterday in Richmond, there were violent protests at the Richmond Republican headquarters where they vandalized the headquarters and stole stuff. What? And I thought to myself, and they call us deplorables. You've got to be kidding me.
Well, George, there's a little bit of marching and looting and rioting that took place last night in Philadelphia, New York, Seattle, Oakland, across the country. That's what happens when crybabies don't get their way.
So 4 years ago, I got a quick question.
Yeah.
How many stores did you loot 4 years ago when you were disappointed to see that Barack Obama won re-election?
Did I loot? I don't think I looted any, George. None.
You didn't?
No.
Oh, I didn't either. That's weird.
I don't do that kind of thing.
I wonder how many of our deplorable listeners in 2012 or 2008 went out and looted, declared it National Free DVR Day or whatever it was. You know what I mean?
Right on.
I have a feeling it's a really low number.
Yeah, I would say it was a low number myself. Yeah, I agree with you on that. So
I guess my point here is the left projects. When they call us deplorables, what they're really admitting is that that's what they are. After all, let's be honest. In the last 5 years, we've had a number of riots. We've had them in Baltimore. We've had them in Ferguson. We've had, we had them in New York. We've had, go around the country. We've had them in a number of places. The people attending those riots, the people attending, that's the wrong word. The people vandalizing, destroying property, and stealing stuff, committing felonies, acts of violence. They were all people of the left. Every last one of them. There wasn't a single person on the right there. That is, to me, very instructive, and it's time for us to recognize, I think, let's be honest, when they start calling us names, we'll just say, whoa, whoa, whoa. Our side doesn't burn the town down when we don't get our way. That's your side. When you fix that, you can call me names. Until then, don't even talk to me.
Well, not only do they call us names, George, but they express their outrage at key battleground states that Donald Trump won. There were demonstrations, protests last night. Thousands of protesters stormed 6th Avenue towards the Trump Tower Wednesday night. Anti-Donald Trump demonstrators took to New York and across the country. The angry mob in Manhattan first gathered at Union Square to protest Trump. Then they later went down the street, and as I said, not only do they not like Donald Trump and conservatives, but they don't like the battleground states. They were like chanting "F you Florida," "F you Indiana," "F you New Hampshire," "F you Mike Pence," "F you Rudy Giuliani." In Oakland, they rioted, broke windows, looted.
Now, I just when did you have any big gatherings of your conservative friends in 2012 that on Wednesday after the election started chanting things like, let's see, Florida went for Obama, F you Florida, or New York or California?
Not really, George. No, not really.
So you probably went to work then and went about your daily life on Wednesday. Probably a little depressed.
Well, that next Wednesday, actually, I was in a radio studio doing the Conservative Commando's radio show. That's what I did the next day.
Because you have something to do.
Yeah,
something productive to do.
I like to think it's productive, absolutely.
Yeah. See, this is why we don't riot. We actually have things to do. We're the ones that make the country work. But when you're sitting around not doing much and got lots of spare time, then every time you get upset, then you can, hop a ride to the local riot and pick up a couple free DVRs or something, a few DVD players or a new car stereo, whatever it is that's, that's available. A fifth of whiskey, I don't know. But, but that's the difference. And I don't mean to be glib about this, but these are just some unpleasant facts that the left is going to have to deal with.
There you go again, George.
I just want to point out, they're the ones who burn and pillage and steal and, tear things down when they get upset.
Yeah.
We rant and rave and write letters to the editor.
Hey, George, I have a little example of some of these protesters in New York, and I'd like to play that for you now.
Excellent.
Policy, and there
needs to be a call to action. Right?
I need Hillary to stand up right now and walk in and sue the United States of America and say, back when black people couldn't vote, right? How many years ago your vote would have been 1/3? Guess what? Today it still is. Today, right now, it still is.
So you don't feel like this was a fair election? Because it looks like Donald Trump won fair and square.
How did he win fair and square? Hillary had more votes. More human beings voted for Hillary. This isn't fair. We didn't get one vote. You didn't.
It's not fair. We don't care what the Constitution says. This is not fair. Hillary got more votes. That's
get a vote. It's just like back in the day when your vote was 1/3.
Well, the whole idea that someone who gets more votes, it always cracks me up when we have this conversation about popular vote versus electoral college. We have a constitution that tells us how we determine who wins the presidency. And they want to pretend that there's another way to do it. It's like at the end of the Super Bowl, your team loses, but they had more first downs. Mm-hmm. And so you say, my team won. And you say, why? The scoreboard says they didn't. They say, they had more first downs. And you go, but that's not how we keep score. But that's the game they play. The way it's not a national election. It's actually 50 individual state elections. Mm-hmm. And they want to pretend it's a national election. But it's not. It's 50 individual state elections that all occur on the same day.
And the Constitution says that we do not have a direct popular vote of our president. We have the system of the Electoral College, that
right.
Each state elects its representatives to represent it at the Electoral College. By the way, those electors are not necessarily bound to vote for that candidate. In fact, there is one elector out in Oregon who says they will not cast their vote for Hillary Clinton, even though the state of Oregon went for Hillary Clinton.
Interesting.
George, the one thing that people...
but you're right.
The one thing people keep getting wrong is this is not a democracy, okay? It is a republic. It is not a democracy. There's a big difference in a democracy and a republic. And people need to understand that difference. They need to do a little research. So when this protester is ranting and raging in the streets that Hillary Clinton got more votes, and she did, George. She got, I think, like 800,000 more votes. I'll actually say there was probably more than 800,000 illegal votes cast for Hillary Clinton. And what that does, George, what the Electoral College does, you know, our founders, our founding fathers were so brilliant in their concepts that right now in California, you've got about 40 million people, okay? And most of those people out there, 70% of them are liberal voters, or liberal Democrat voters. So just think of if we had a pure democracy and California wanted something, what about the rights of, let's say, Delaware or Connecticut or Rhode Island? That if we had a true democracy, whatever California wanted, we would all get. Well, that's fine. If California wants to do something out on the crazy West Coast, let them do it. But who's to say that's right for everyone in America? So we have this system. You're
exactly right. That's the whole point. Is we have a system that's why I say it was a system of 50 individual states, because they wanted to do it state by state by state, not just one conglomerate national election. And people ignore that fact.
Indeed they do. Indeed they do.
I think we might be running up against the break, are we?
You know, you're right. I'm not even paying attention. Thank you for you are. And you are listening to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth. And I'm Rick Trader, coming to you from the studios of the Conservative Commandos radio network at WNJC 1360 in Philadelphia and around the world on the internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, AM/FM 24/7. Avoid disappointment and future regret. Don't go away. George and I will be right back.
They say I'm crazy. I really don't care. That's my prerogative. They say I'm nasty, but I...
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos radio network. We are establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired of the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos radio network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturdays from 2 to 6 p.m. on WNJC Radio, 1360 on your AM dial, or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our website, CCRSnetwork.com, for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where now even more newsmakers go to be heard.
Since 2011, we have been calling for a national commitment from all Americans to participate in an annual event to honor all of the victims and their families who suffered during and after the most devastating event to ever take place on American soil. We all remember those horrible scenes of destruction on September 11th, 2001 that unfolded right before our eyes, either up front or on television. We continue to ask every American to participate in the united action of prayer, which is simply to stop whatever you are doing at precisely 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. to either observe 1 minute of silence or to offer a prayer to honor the memory of those who are directly affected by this unforgettable scene of destruction. Please include a prayer of thanks for living in a country where even something as horrific as 9/11 could not weaken our spirit. This year, we would like to ask one more thing as a show of unity, since we are still fighting with the enemy who caused the 9/11 tragedy. Would you display the flag for the day at your home, on your car, bike, or anywhere you can display Old Glory? Let's show our enemies that we can still unite in our love for our country.
You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando radio show.
Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth and yours truly, Rick Trader. And if you'd like to hear rebroadcasts of our shows, check out our websites, ccrshow.com or ccrsnetwork.com. Or at noontime, log on to roarradio.net, or at 11 p.m. log on to highplainsdailynews.com, or you can hear this show and all the shows that are part of the Conservative Commandos network here at WNJC 1360 from your telephone by calling 832-999-1199. George, I understand you had a little bit of problems hearing that audio, so we got you on another line. How's this connection, George?
Sounds good.
All right.
Hear me?
Oh, yep. We will go with it. We will go with it. So, George, the media was not very happy with, Donald Trump. And I want to play another little clip of audio. And this is the media predicting the outcome of the election.
Tomorrow night, I think when Hillary Clinton wins, that Donald Trump will have lost this election from the very first day he announced.
He sure did.
After Mexicans.
Classic Trump. I think you have to view last night's debate as Donald Trump's concession speech. He realizes he can't win.
Donald Trump's concession.
Had no chance, in my view.
No chance.
And the numbers are going to bear that out tomorrow.
Well, I can't find a single Republican who now thinks they're going to win.
You can't go into a general election with only 25% of the Republican base behind you and expect to win in a general. You just can't.
That's an awfully difficult lead to make up. It really is at this point, particularly when Trump's negatives remain in the 60s, which is just almost unprecedented.
We may lose by historic proportions.
That approach. He knows he can't win, so why not?
No. I think Donald Trump has fooled himself into looking at his crowds and the rallies and the size, and he thinks that's America.
He had no chance to win doing what
No. Donald Trump wasn't fooled, George. All these brainy butt liberals who think they know everything and that Donald Trump was going to lose by historic numbers, that he lost the election the day he announced that at the debate he delivered his concession speech. Oh my George, what happened?
Well, this is an interesting issue.
By the way, George, I need to ask you a question. Are you a Republican?
I am.
And I know the day before the election I asked you, and you told me that Donald Trump is going to win.
Right. You asked me and said, so what's up? And I said he's going to win, and I explained briefly why. And I've been predicting this for a long time. The area I was wrong in is I actually thought he would win by a little bit more than he did. I thought he might win by 3 to 4 percentage points. And I had the Electoral College count about right, but I didn't have the popular vote about right. And, again, has all kinds of other factors that have nothing to do with Donald Trump or the campaign, and could be everything from voter fraud to illegals voting. In Virginia, 60,000 felons were given the right to vote, even though, as I said, they were felons. But at any rate, and my rationale was really pretty simple. I was pretty certain that Hillary would be unable to mobilize the Barack Obama coalition.
And you were right about that, George. In fact, Hillary Clinton got 6 million 6 million less votes than Barack Obama got in 2012. She got 10 million less votes than Barack Obama got in 2008.
Right.
So she didn't mobilize. Her base, the Democrat base, did not get out to support her.
Exactly. And then on top of that, I knew that Donald Trump was going to have a segment of society that was going to be very energized. Basically, that segment would be the following. People who have witnessed and lived through the last 8 years and said to themselves, oh my gosh, could things possibly get any worse? And Donald Trump was able to connect with people who'd had it, who'd simply had it up to their eyeballs with the insanity, the Obamacare, the liberal judges, the lying about targeting conservatives, you name it. And so folks showed up in numbers that were unexpected. They tended to be areas that were less, more conservative in nature. And in any given presidential year, you might have a certain 60-65% voting, and a much larger percentage of those people said, I've had it. I'm voting. I'm going to stop this insanity. It's getting too much. Because sometimes we don't vote because basically we're just not that, we're just not that into it. Things aren't that bad. But you know what? When your house is burning down, you're going to grab a bucket and start, pitching water. And that's what I think Americans did. And so I always felt that Donald Trump would win. I always felt that that Hillary was going to have a hard time winning. And she's incredibly distrusted. She's following after 8 years. So there's nothing in this that's terribly surprising me. But I think the media was shocked by this result. Absolutely. You could see it in their eyes. I had a friend who texted me late at night on Tuesday, said, George, I don't know what you're watching, but you've got to watch MSNBC. It is hilarious. They're having a complete meltdown, And it was like I was watching The Wizard of Oz, and someone just pitched a bucket of water on the Wicked Witch, and they were melting before my very eyes. They were absolutely becoming unhinged because it had never occurred to them that Donald Trump might win, and of course they were completely convinced of their own rhetoric that Donald Trump and all of his supporters really are deplorables, and so this was just inconceivable. Inconceivable! I feel like saying, why do you keep saying that word? I do not think that word means what you think it means. If you know what that's a reference to.
Yep.
That's a reference to Princess Bride. This guy keeps saying, inconceivable! Inconceivable! And eventually the guy, the thing that he says is inconceivable keeps happening. And so finally a guy looks at him and says, why do you keep saying that word? I do not think that word means what you think it means. At any rate, but that's the way it is with the left. I guarantee you, these people don't know anybody who voted for Donald Trump. They really don't. They don't know anyone who voted for Donald Trump. They have no friends, no neighbors, no. So to them, the idea that people voted for Donald Trump is literally inconceivable.
Hey, George, you talk about the media crying. This is Martha Raddatz, and I wanted to play this little piece of audio for you, and we're going to put you on hold, George, so you can hear it.
His understanding of military policy and civilian-military divide. I don't know that he really has a plan for what he's going to do there. He has General Mike Flynn. General Mike Flynn has been with him. He'll quickly tell you he has 200 admirals and generals backing him. I think Mike Flynn has been a huge influence on him. I was also looking back and at an interview Tim Kaine gave. Tim Kaine has a son in the Marine Corps. He was asked by John Dickerson, so if Donald Trump is democratically elected and your son is serving as a Marine, you wouldn't trust his life under that commander-in-chief? And Kaine said, I wouldn't. That's a pretty extraordinary thing to say. if you have a son in the Marine Corps and that you don't trust the Commander-in-Chief. The people in the military defend the Constitution.
And there's Martha Raddatz, George. She's just about choking. And by the way, I want to wish happy 241st birthday to the U.S. Marine Corps. But, George, that was Martha Raddatz. I mean, she was just about in tears. I mean, maybe we should feel sorry for the lame-brained media. You know, maybe we should feel sorry for them, George, because they put so much time and energy and emotion and money. Couple examples, George. Last August, there was a movie out. It was supposed to be a sympathetic movie about Barack Obama and Michelle Obama in their first date. America didn't care because the thing bombed at the box office. But that didn't stop the lame-brained liberals from producing that movie. And then for the past few years, NBC has been carrying this series called Madam Secretary, with a woman who maybe looks a little like Hillary Clinton. Certainly the hairdo was the Hillary Clinton hairdo in the movies. Ratings have been terrible on this thing, George, but they continue to play it. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah. No, I'm you know, this is the weird thing. The media essentially becomes this echo chamber, and they say these things, and they become true to them. Now, you know, to you and I, we live in a real world. We're confronted all the time with things that we don't agree with, that we don't believe. And so one of the things that I think being a conservative does is it makes you more tolerant, because we every day have to listen to, hear, confront ideas, beliefs, things we don't agree with. And, you know, we don't get violent about it all. But we have to deal with those things. If you're a college professor, if you work in the media, you don't have that experience. You get to surround yourself with your own echo. And the only opinions, the only ideas, the only thoughts that are expressed are ones that you yourself have expressed. And you live in this echo chamber. And as a result, people basically become these kind of like idiotic, nutty, just devoid of any rationality. And that's what happens. And so it's one of the reasons why I actually believe that as a conservative, we tend to be better informed than the other side, because we don't actually just get to listen to ourselves. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We you know, society doesn't afford us that opportunity. Real life doesn't let you have that. But if you're a liberal, you can live in a world in which you only have to listen to yourself. You know, Barack Obama lives in that crazy world too. He lives in a world in which everyone, you know, fawns and you know, he surrounds himself with servile and fawning yahoos who tell him he's the smartest man in the room and the smartest man on the planet, and his leadership is awesome, and he saved the economy, and all this other tripe that when he says in speeches, most of America looks at each other and goes, what is he talking about? But he and all of his friends are like, yeah, that's awesome, isn't it? Yeah. Well, it's because that's all they ever hear. It's all they ever think about. And they're not forced to deal with reality, which is why they get angry when you say something that confronts the things they believe. It's like, how dare you? Nobody believes what you just said. That's outrageous. And the answer is, well, no, actually, most people believe what I just said. It's just that you don't have any friends who are sane and normal. You hang out with a bunch of losers. And so that's why this media outrage and frustration, and like I said, it was fun to watch MSNBC for the few moments I could stand it as they melted down.
Hey, George, let's take another break. We kind of went through the last one, but you are listening to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth and Rick Trader, coming to you from the studios of the Conservative Commandos radio network at WNJC 1360 in Philadelphia and around the world on the internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, AM, FM 24/7. Today's show is being brought to you by the First Amendment, protected by the Second. Don't go away. George and I will be right back.
I really don't care. That's my prerogative. They say I'm nasty, but I...
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos radio network. We are establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired of the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos radio network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturdays from 2 to 6 p.m. on WNJC Radio, 1360 on your AM dial, or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our website, CCRSnetwork.com, for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where now even more newsmakers go to be heard.
Since 2011, we have been calling for a national commitment from all Americans to participate in an annual event to honor all of the victims and their families who suffered during and after the most devastating event to ever take place on American soil. We all remember those horrible scenes of destruction on September 11th, 2001 that unfolded right before our eyes, either up front or on television. We continue to ask every American to participate in the united action of prayer, which is simply to stop whatever you are doing at precisely 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. to either observe 1 minute of silence or to offer a prayer to honor the memory of those who are directly affected by this unforgettable scene of destruction. Please include a prayer of thanks for living in a country where even something as horrific as 9/11 could not weaken our spirit. This year, we would like to ask one more thing as a show of unity since we are still fighting with the enemy who caused the 9/11 tragedy. Would you display the flag for the day at your home, on your car, bike, or anywhere you can display Old Glory? Let's show our enemies that we can still unite in our love for our country.
You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando radio show.
Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth and Rick Trader. And for rebroadcasts of this show, check out our websites, ccrshow.com or ccrsnetwork.com, or noontime, log on to roarradio.net, or 11 p.m., highplainsdailynews.com, or you can hear our show any time of the day from your telephone by calling 832-999-1199. George Landreth, what else is on your radar screen?
Well, I was thinking, probably mostly sarcastically, that we should take up a collection for people like, Jon Stewart and Miley Cyrus, Samuel L. Jackson, Spike Lee, all of the Cher, Barbara Streisand. These are individuals who said that they were going to leave the country if Donald Trump was elected. My favorite was actually Raven, I think it's Simone. She used to have a Disney as a kid show, but anyhow, I don't know what she does now. But she, quote, said that she was going to move to Canada, quote, if any Republican gets nominated. So in other words, if a Republican simply won the nomination of the Republican Party, she was going to move to Canada. In other words, if they don't throw in the towel before the nomination phase, I'm leaving. Actually, she's too stupid to know what she said. What she meant to say is if a Republican wins, but she doesn't know the difference between, So this is what it comes down to. We have a bunch of stupid, idiotic, lame-brained. Go through and look up what your typical Hollywood person, what they've kind of done with their life. Most of them have virtually no education, and when they speak, you can tell they're stupid as grass. They have to be good at memorizing lines or something like that, or perhaps, whatever. These are not remarkably intelligent people, and that's why they say these stupid things. But anyhow, so for the mentally challenged in Hollywood, I think that as patriotic Americans, we should help them achieve their life's dream, which is to live someplace else. I actually, instead of sending them to Canada, because that seems unfair, I mean, we actually like the Canadians. Why would we export toxic waste to them? I think we should send them all, I think we should all send them to, I was going to say Iran. I think that Iran is the perfect place for them.
Yeah, why not?
So, I don't know, we should look up
or
and see
Cuba,
about
Iran, or Cuba. Venezuela, George. Venezuela would be great for them.
Yeah, Venezuela, okay. But I mean, so we ought to check and see what, like, first-class flights, because I think we ought to do it right. I mean, let's not go cheap. Let's do it right. What would, 20 first-class tickets or business class to Venezuela? I don't even fly that way. I always fly coach. But for these people, as important as they are, they should, get better than us little deplorables. And we should send them to either Venezuela, one-way ticket to Venezuela, or a one-way ticket to Iran. That's just my suggestion. If our listeners are inclined, maybe they can email us or text us, and we'll actually start a GoFundMe project to make sure that these people can get the heck out of this country.
George, I love that idea. With the caveat, they must sign a contract promising never to return.
Oh, I agree. I don't even want them coming back for, the Academy Awards. They can just attend via video.
Yeah, I don't even want them coming back for Thanksgiving.
Right. So, anyhow.
I love that idea, George.
Right. Al Sharpton, another one. That'd be great to see him leave. Anyhow, it's funny. A lot of these people are listed as listed as comedians, and I'm like, really? I didn't know that person was a comedian because I've never heard them say anything funny.
Yeah.
Whoopi Goldberg. It was funny to see the long list of people who claim to be comedians. It's like, I thought it was a requirement you be funny to be a comedian.
Whoopi Goldberg was what I never thought was somebody who was considered a comedian. I never heard her say anything funny. Yet she's a comedian, supposedly.
Yeah. So anyhow, that's one of the things that I think is worth considering. The other thing I think we ought to take note of here, and I'm not one who thinks that polling is always wrong. Generally speaking, if the polling's a useful tool. The problem is that when the media becomes part of the story and their goal is to defeat somebody, then they end up, essentially perverting the. But polling can be a useful tool, is my point. But at the same time, this is the problem. Polling is not always right. If it were, we wouldn't need to hold elections. We could just have the last poll conducted by the New York Times.
Right.
And say, okay, well, it would save us all time and money. You wouldn't have to take off time from work to go vote. You wouldn't have to wait in line. We wouldn't have to worry about counting. It would be much quicker. But that's the reason why you actually, most of the time, the odds makers are right about who wins the football game, right? Most of the time, they're right. My guess is 85% of the time they are right, but we play the game anyhow because sometimes they're not, and that's the point here. And so I think we always have to remember this fact, which is, as conservatives, the media is going to try to dissuade us from voting. One way to do it is to tell us it's over. There's no way we can win, and they're going to try to get us to stay home. Don't you fall for it. The election is held for a reason. We don't have polling to determine who our leaders are, and we can win even when they say we're not going to. That's what I had friends who, told me that, here's the numbers, George, how can you possibly say we're going to win? And I just said two factors. One is the Brexit vote, meaning the people who said enough's enough, I'm tired of this crap, I want my country back. It's a different issue, obviously, but Brexit was the EU. Right. And the average Briton just said enough. I'm tired of bureaucrats in Brussels telling me what I can do. And I think a lot of Americans felt the same way. Different set of issues, but the same general principle. And they were undercounted. And so I think it's important that as conservatives we remember this fact, is that there is no predetermined outcome just because the polls say we're behind. I always knew we were going to outperform the polls. It would have been problematic if we'd been down by 10 in the polls, because I'm not sure we're going to outperform the polls by 10, but I knew that Donald Trump was going to outperform his polls. And there's a simple reason for this.
Mm-hmm.
The media spends all of its time telling us we're deplorables. It spends all of its time telling us that anybody who supports Donald Trump is a bad person, a racist, a hate monger, a blah, 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 blah. And so a lot of people get to a point where they just kind of shut down and say, I'm voting for him, but I'm not going to subject myself to this abuse. I'm just going to keep my mouth shut about it. I'm going to go vote silently for him, and, to heck with these people. And so you end up underperforming in the polls. And that's fine, because the polls don't actually count, as long as you show up to the actual poll and vote. And but that's ultimately why often we will underperform, because the left spends its time vilifying us. And then people, some people will actually kind of go, well, I don't want to have to deal with this garbage. So anyhow, I just think it's important as conservatives let this teach you the point that, it's important. And the good news is, as I see it, this election has a lot of good news in it for Americans. As I see it, you and I talked on the radio show, just a couple weeks ago when Donald Trump gave his address in Gettysburg. And it was essentially what he wanted to do in the first 100 days. And I would argue that he has a mandate. And I would argue that that was an important speech. The media poo-pooed it. The media acted like it didn't matter. But he put on notice and said, this is what I stand for. And if you elect me, this is what I will do. And Hillary basically walked around saying something about, glass ceilings and better together or, stronger together. But there's no real there. Right. And on top of all the corruption and poor performance as a senator and as a secretary of state, her campaign was not about anything. And so Donald Trump made his campaign about some things that matter, things like lower taxes and less regulation, which right out of the box will start creating jobs. We're going to end up seeing GDP growth, and we're going to see job growth. And they're going to be real jobs. And we're going to see incomes go up, because that's how it happens. When employers put out a job call and they can't get enough people to fill the openings they have, they up the pay. And if they put out a job call and 1,000 people show up and they only have one position, they know they're paying plenty, and they might get away with paying less. And so this is the Barack Obama economy. We're now going to have a new economy. I think that's important. That'll for average everyday folks, that'll matter. Another thing that I think really will matter is he promised he would overturn Obama's unconstitutional executive orders and all these unilateral decisions he did with his pen and his phone. He can do that on day one. And that will immediately unleash a certain amount of growth and a certain amount of jobs, simply because the burdens on business will be smaller.
Absolutely.
So these are big deals. And then, of course, you've got the repealing of Obamacare, and you've got a president now that will sign it. You have a House that will pass it. And the Senate, even though the Republicans are close, my guess is we're in a position where literally Mr. Trump, President Trump, when this will happen, today President-elect, but when he can walk into someone like Joe Manchin's office and say, I won your state overwhelmingly. You're up for re-election in 2 years. You don't really want me campaigning in your state every single day, reminding people that the thing they elected me to do, you stood in the way.
Well, Joe Manchin has already said that he might caucus with the Republicans. I think there's a very good, West Virginia, which is the state that Joe Manchin represents in the U.S. Senate, West Virginia overwhelmingly went for Donald Trump. Okay? He won West Virginia huge. Oh,
absolutely. Well, and this is the point, but there's a number of states like this. There's states like this up in, a lot of these states, there's, you've got, you look at Ohio, you look at these states, you look at Florida, a lot of these swing states, Wisconsin, Michigan, they have a Democratic senator, at least one. Mm-hmm. And he can go there and say, I won your state. And I promised people that we would get rid of Obamacare. And so you can vote no if you'd like. But if you do, I'm going to make your life really difficult, and I'm going to make sure that your Senate term ends in 2 years. Now, that's one of the things that Reagan used to do. Reagan would go to people, and he would promise people, if you will vote on this important bill for what I've asked for, like his tax cuts, he says, I will not campaign against you. I'm not saying I'll endorse you, but I will sit the race out, and I will not go after you. But let me tell you this, buddy. You don't vote for me, and I will come after you with a vengeance. And guess what? With a Democratic Congress and a Democratic Senate, Ronald Reagan got his tax plan through because that threat was significant. That's my point. Donald Trump will be in a position to do the exact same thing, and he will already have built-in Republican majorities. He only has to, in the Senate, twist a few arms to make sure that they don't filibuster. So I'm very optimistic about what can happen here. I think it's important. I think we will see, and we haven't even talked about the conservative Supreme Court yet. But do you see the point here?
Yep.
If you're a conservative and you're not excited and animated about what happened on Tuesday night and in the wee hours of Wednesday morning, then you've been asleep at the wheel and you don't get it, because there are amazing, wonderful things that can happen, and we can do a lot of good to undo so much of the harm that was done by Barack Obama, and quite frankly, trying to get things back where they ought to be so that we have strong economic growth. We have courts that uphold the rule of law and make sure that we have fairness and freedom for everyone, an opportunity for everyone, but we don't use the courts as a way to, backdoor the legislative process and turn our Supreme Court into, instead of 535 senators and congressmen voting on legislation, you just got 9 of them.
Right.
So, I mean, I can't say, and again, I'm a guy who was, I liked Scott Walker, whatever. That was ancient history. People who've been listening to this radio show have heard me, and I've never wavered in my belief that every single Republican and conservative and any thinking independent needed to be voting for Donald Trump. Once he became the nominee, that was clearly my position. And today, I look at this and say to myself, we are in a position as a movement to do some great things. And we ought to be excited. And I hope that someone like Ted Cruz, who I'm sure is still battered and bruised because he lost, understands that the things that he'd like to see happen in America can and are much more likely to happen now. And this is a good thing. And so people have to be willing to set aside whatever frustrations or hurt feelings or whatever it is that was stuck in their craw. They need to get it unstuck, and we need to move forward with confidence and together in a united fashion, because we have a country to rebuild, and we have an economy to resurrect. We have a constitution to protect and to uphold, and these are big things. And to me, this matters. So I like I said to I was talking to my sister and my mom, and I just said, the sun is shining. I don't care where you are, and I don't care if it's raining out. The sun is shining. Life is good, and things are so much brighter now than they were just 3 days ago.
I agree, George. The one thing that I want to caution our listeners and fellow conservatives about is what the mainstream media and the liberal side is going to try to do to Donald Trump in the next 4 years. It started last night, George, with these riots. Don't give me this bull that these riots and demonstrations were spontaneous. They were organized, George.
They were probably paid for by Soros.
Absolutely.
We know that he paid for the garbage that went on in Ferguson. I mean, he donated like $25 million. I mean, what I think's funny is I thought this guy was supposed to be smart. If you gave me $25 million, I could organize something a lot better than Ferguson.
Well, look at the people he had to work with, George. Yeah. You're thinking of spending $25 million on right-thinking business-type people, okay? George Soros' $25 million goes to the left liberals who don't really have great business sense. So, your $25 million would go a lot further than his.
Fair enough. That's but that's my frustration, I guess. It really is what it comes down to is we've got to figure out, as a movement to not allow ourselves now that we've won to...
No, we haven't won. This was only a battle. We won a battle. We didn't win the war.
Oh, yeah, you're right. The war's not over.
The war, it's a lifelong effort.
That's the one thing we know for sure. Is
right.
You're exactly right. This is a perpetual battle for liberty. Liberty will always be on the... if you will, on the block, and there'll be those who want to take it, and there'll be those who want to defend it, and we better always be prepared to defend it. But for today we won. But let's not spend too much time celebrating. Let's be prepared to get together and work. I know there's this temptation to spend a lot of time. As soon as you've won something, everyone wants to argue about, who gets the credit and why, and Ronald Reagan once said, you can get so much done if you don't worry about who gets the credit. At this point, what we've got to get done is the things that Donald Trump talked about in that speech in Gettysburg. That's what we have to do. That has to be our focus. Our focus can't be all kinds of, I want credit for this. I did a really good job in turning out the vote in my county here. It's great. Now what are we going to do? And it often happens in politics because of people's egos that we get divided up and we start, I hope we don't do that. I hope we're focused and we recognize the great opportunity we have. And then nothing breeds success like success. So if we can get the economy turned around in 2 years, we'll see big gains in the Senate. We'll see big gains in the states. We'll see big gains in the House because success breeds success. And if we get the economy rolling again, it will happen. So this is a great opportunity, but we ought to be smart, and we ought to do the things that as conservatives we have all talked about. And let's not get stuck, fighting over, bits and scraps at the table. Let's make this, like the campaign slogan, let's make America great again.
Indeed, let's make America great again. And you are listening to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth and yours truly, Rick Trader, coming to you from the studios of the Conservative Commandos radio network at WNJC 1360 in Philadelphia, around the world on the internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, AM, FM, 24/7. Hey, don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. Don't go away. George and I will be right back with James Roberts, president of the American Studies Center. Be right back.
Yeah, that's my prerogative. They say I'm nasty, but
This is Rick Trader, host of the Conservative Commandos radio show.
And I'm John Forsyth, owner of WNJC Radio. Fellow patriots, the Conservative Commandos radio show is for conservatives, about conservatives, and by conservatives.
We are patriots who want to take our country back from the likes of Barack Obama, Harry Reid, George Soros, and Nancy Pelosi.
But we can't keep up this fight without your critical support today. Can you help? Please go to www.helpccrs.com right now and make a donation by credit card or PayPal. That's www.helpccrs.com.
Our goal is to expose the liberal agenda and distortions.
We are fighting to spread the truth about political issues, political leaders, and conservative issues and values.
Our hosts are not paid. In fact, we buy our own airtime, studio time, and pay our own expenses.
We created the show because we are trying to make a difference. So can you help the CCRS expose the truth in 2014 and beyond? Go to www.helpccrs.com.
Help keep the Conservative Commandos radio show on the air by going to www.helpccrs.com and make a donation today to return our country to the conservative roots created by our founding fathers.
Since 2011, we have been calling for a national commitment from all Americans to participate in an annual event to honor all of the victims and their families who suffered during and after the most devastating event to ever take place on American soil. We all remember those horrible scenes of destruction on September 11th, 2001 that unfolded right before our eyes, either up front or on television. We continue to ask every American to participate in the united action of prayer, which is simply to stop whatever you are doing at precisely 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. to either observe 1 minute of silence or to offer a prayer to honor the memory of those who are directly affected by this unforgettable scene of destruction. Please include a prayer of thanks for living in a country where even something as horrific as 9/11 could not weaken our spirit. This year, we would like to ask one more thing as a show of unity since we are still fighting with the enemy who caused the 9/11 tragedy. Would you display the flag for the day at your home, on your car, bike, or anywhere you can display Old Glory? Let's show our enemies that we can still unite in our love for our country.
I'm Pastor Christina Lamanier. I'm a concerned mother and grandmother, and I urge you to vote for Donald Trump. Our Commander-in-Chief's highest priority is to secure the safety and freedom of Americans of every race, creed, and color. Trump will solve the ISIS crisis quickly and utilize the talents of people like Mayor Rudy Giuliani to restore law and order in our streets. Donald Trump will build the wall, secure our borders, and bring back jobs and prosperity to America by slashing taxes, cutting government waste, stamping out political correctness, harnessing our abundant natural resources, unleashing the patriotism and genius of we the people. Always remember, there is a special place in heaven for followers of Jesus Christ.
For more information, log on to INRASuperPAC.com. INRA Super PAC paid for this ad and is solely responsible for its content, not authorized by any candidate or its committee.
What does it take to be the leader in production systems technology? To be the one company that solves production problems at any plant, for any product, and with any technology? It takes a 30-year record of success. It takes total mastery of complex technologies with a history of delivering success every time, without fail. Only one company can claim that high ground in manufacturing line optimization, data automation, and systems integration, and that's Philadelphia Control Systems. In factories worldwide, Philadelphia Control Systems programs, software, and engineering solutions deliver optimal performance and output flow with a record that can't be matched. Any plant, any product, any technology. Philadelphia Control Systems, the leader in production automation since 1982. 800-335-9811. PCS4automation.com. That's PCS, the number 4, automation.com.
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos Radio Network. We're establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired as I am about the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos Radio Network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. on WNJC Radio 1360 a.m. or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our websites, ConservativeCommandosRadioNetwork.com and CCRN.com for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where even more newsmakers go to be heard. From the East Coast to the West Coast and around the world on the internet. We're coming to you live from the CCRS studios. WNJC 1360. This is the Conservative Commandos radio show with your host, Rick Trader. The Conservative Commandos radio show, where the newsmakers go to be heard. Businessman there, drink my wine. You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos Radio Show with George Landreth and Rick Trader. And, George, one of the things I love about doing live radio is it is live, and it is like life, and you make mistakes. And I think I told you that our first guest would be James Roberts. Actually, our first guest is supposed to be J.D. Gordon. So John Forsyth Jr. at this moment is trying to reach him.
Fair enough.
So we got J.D. on the line. George, we're going to put you on hold and bring you and J.D. in at the same time. And George, we have our first guest with us. Please make the introduction.
Excellent. J.D. Gordon is a former Pentagon spokesman. He served under both Secretary Donald Rumsfeld and Robert Gates, and he is a retired Navy commander. Since he left the Defense Department, he has served as a senior fellow and a communications and policy advisor to a number of different think tanks, foundations, and national policy figures, including President-elect Donald Trump and former Alaska governor and former vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin and former presidential candidate Herman Cain have sought his advice and counsel. He is a member of President-elect's Donald Trump's transition team, and additionally, you've probably seen him his work at Fox News and the Washington Times. He also regularly appears on a wide variety of television and radio outlets, again, discussing national security and foreign policy issues typically. J.D., welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show.
Thanks, George. Thanks, Rick. That's a kind introduction. I always enjoy being with you guys.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, we were just kind of talking about all the great things that America is kind of looking at staring down the throat at, so to speak, in terms of things that will free up our economy, things that will help job growth, things that will help wages go up, all these kinds of things. We talked about the Supreme Court a little bit. We talked about some of the executive orders, Obamacare, all these different things that really, for the first time in 8 years, we can start to undo some of the damage that's been done. But on a national security basis, all of those are more domestically oriented. I noticed, for example, the mullahs in Iran seemed to be concerned. They were making threats and so forth. I'm reminded that when Ronald Reagan was elected, a bunch of our hostages were on a plane even before he was sworn in. So the fact that the mullahs seem concerned is, in my mind, a good thing. But tell us, is his election good for more than just the domestic issues?
Yeah, I think it is, George. I think it's a wake-up call to the United States and a wake-up call to the world that we're back. We're going to make America great again. And I think we have to be tough with our adversaries and people that want to challenge us and people that are committing terrorism against us and that have committed terrorist attacks against us. So I think that radical Islam and the folks that are the purveyors, whether it's coming from Iran, the Shia brand, or whether it's coming from Saudi Arabia, the Sunni brand, they have to be put on notice that we're going to defeat this ideology, we're going to protect America, and we're going to have a very vigorous screening for anybody that even comes into this country. And it's about time.
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer. We give out a Ronald Reagan Award every year, and one of the things that and I speak on Ronald Reagan. I'm a big fan of his. He made it very clear, peace through strength. And when asked what his foreign policy was going to be and what his plan was to defeat Soviet communism, he said, we win, they lose. And then he set about to do it. And I think that there were those who thought he needed to be more diplomatic, if you will, and so forth. But I think sometimes people misunderstand that diplomacy, while it has its place, the reality is most of the world does not respect the power of moral suasion. Most people respect power. The mullahs are not interested in a good argument, and they're not interested in what the morally right thing to do is. Neither is ISIS. But power is something they can respond to.
They're interested in the morally right thing for them, which is to rule the world. I mean, so the morals for the mullahs in Iran are to make sure that the Persian Empire is restored to its greatness and that Islam dominates the world and it's the Shia form of Islam. And the morals for the Saudis are to export Sunni Islam and their extreme form of Wahhabism, which also wants to dominate the world. I mean, that's morally right for them. And unfortunately, the United States is in the way from their perspective. So the Iranians and the Saudis are just doing what they think is the right thing to do. But we're not going to let them. You know, it's time for our leadership of the White House to not make excuses for these folks and to challenge them. And Mr. Trump is one of the best guys to do it. You know, one of my favorite things about Mr. Trump is that when he talked about a Muslim ban, he was roundly criticized. You know, and perhaps you can't ban all Muslims, and he's gone back on that. But we have talked about an extreme vetting, a rigorous vetting from around the world, in particularly in places where there's a very strong presence of radical Islam terrorism. So, you know, that's a few dozen countries. But one of the guys who attacked him was Prince bin Alawi, who's a prince, Saudi prince, one of the richest guys in the world. And, you know, he was a key stakeholder in News Corp, which owns the Wall Street Journal and Fox News. And when Alawi tweeted an insulting comment about Mr. Trump's comments, Mr. Trump tweeted back at him saying that dopey Prince Alawi thinks he can buy influence with his daddy's money, not when I'm president. And I thought, wow, it's about time we have somebody standing up to this influence of this strong-arm type of Islam that President Obama tries to pretend is not there, tries to pretend has nothing to do with Islam. No, I mean, it's not a fake Quran that these guys are using. So finally, thank God, somebody to stand up for America.
Right. I agree. I mean, that's one of the things that I think is important. You cannot underestimate the world, its reaction to a president who is resolute, who projects strength and certainty, and versus a president who leads from behind, a president who makes it clear he's willing to capitulate to anyone on any issue. Ronald Reagan was able to defeat Soviet communism without firing a shot, and it was because of that approach. And I see Donald Trump as trying to use that same sort of approach, which is a peace through strength approach, and it's one that works. Every time it's been tried, it's worked, and every time someone thinks they found a better way, all they prove is they're stupid.
Yeah, stupid, or just have a negative view of the United States. And, you know, that's why a lot of people on the left go to school and they learn at university that America is not a great country. It's a country of slavery and Jim Crow laws. And you have guys like Colin Kaepernick and other idiots staking a knee at NFL football games for the national anthem. I mean, it's really disgraceful what's going on. So it's about time we had someone speak up for our country, speak up for our values, and say, no, enough, time out. Now, that said, it was a very divisive election. So it's time to heal. It's time to get the country back together. It was very good Mr. Trump had a chance to visit with President Obama. That is positive, and we're going to have a very smooth transition.
Absolutely. We are going to have to go to break in just a second, but I want to make sure that Rick gets a chance to jump in. And
gentlemen, when you're talking about peace through strength, I believe when you're talking about the Middle East, that's the one thing that they understand. They understand strength. And I'm reminded of a book that was written by a gentleman by the name of Bing West called The Strongest Tribe. And if you remember, after the Iraq War, there was a lot of fighting there. This was before the surge. And then we had the surge where George Bush sent like 30,000 extra troops there. And then these warlords started coming over to our side. And Bing West asked one of these warlords, why are you switching sides now? And this warlord said to him, well, you don't understand us, and you don't understand our history, because if you did, you would know we always follow the strongest tribe. And right now, you guys are the strongest tribe. And JD, I think what has happened in the last year of the Obama administration, we have given up that place as the strongest tribe. So we're not respected there anymore. And that strongest tribe may now be something called ISIS. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. There is a saying over there, too, like you mentioned, Bin Laden used to say it all the time, you pick the strongest horse. I mean, that's just a very realistic way to look at it, but that's certainly how they look at things in the Middle East and Russia and most of the world, frankly. But, the United States is $20 trillion in debt, and we've had our military gutted, as you know, under President Obama. So I think that we have to get our economy going. We've got to bring jobs back, and we got to project power, but also to make sure our allies do some of the heavy lifting. Of the 28 NATO countries, only 5 of them pay what they're supposed to pay. It's the agreed upon amount, and that's 2% of their gross domestic product. Only 5 out of 28. Mr. Trump is right to identify that and push for our allies to do more, whether they're in Europe or whether they're in Asia. Japan and South Korea, they have to do a lot more as well. We can't keep being the world's policeman, and I think Mr. Trump's very right about that. We have to have people that share our values and love of freedom pay some of that cost for the freedom. The United States is no longer the only superpower as far as the relative power we have to the rest of the world. Yeah, we're still the world's biggest power. We're also still the superpower. But we're sinking in debt every day. And so we have to get our allies to do more. And Mr. Trump has been right all along on that.
JD, I wanted to go to break, but I can't go to break without asking you about Donald Trump has been portrayed because of a stance on NATO as being against our allies. That how would you argue that point, that he's not against our allies?
Well, there's a lot of straw man arguments made about him constantly. People were saying things like he says that Japan and South Korea should get nukes. That's not true. I mean, there's all these straw man arguments that the Democrats made against him. Unfortunately for them, they've lost, which is good because they lied. Mm-hmm. But he is for our allies. He just wants them to pay their fair share. I mean, that's kind of common sense. He's a career businessman, and so when he has contracts with people, he expects them to deliver what the contract was. I mean, it's that simple. So I think he's very, very much for our allies. He just wants them to pull their own weight, which Secretary Gates has said. Even President Obama said that. So this is not really new, but he's the first guy to really push it as a core part of his message.
Hey, JD, we have to take a 2-minute break. Can you hold for us, please?
Sure.
And you are listening to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth, President and CEO of Frontiers of Freedom. I'm Rick Trader, the deplorable one, coming to you from the studios of the Conservative Commandos radio network at WNJC 1316 Philadelphia and around the world on the internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, AM, FM 24/7. Our guest this segment is our very good friend, J.D. Gordon, whose claim to fame is he's a conservative commando, once one, always one. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
They say I'm nasty, but
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos radio network. We are establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired of the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos radio network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturdays from 2 to 6 p.m. on WNJC Radio, 1360 on your AM dial, or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our website, CCRSnetwork.com, for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where now even more newsmakers go to be heard.
Since 2011, we have been calling for a national commitment from all Americans to participate in an annual event to honor all of the victims and their families who suffered during and after the most devastating event to ever take place on American soil. We all remember those horrible scenes of destruction on September 11th, 2001 that unfolded right before our eyes, either up front or on television. We continue to ask every American to participate in the united action of prayer, which is simply to stop whatever you are doing at precisely 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. to either observe 1 minute of silence or to offer a prayer to honor the memory of those who are directly affected by this unforgettable scene of destruction. Please include a prayer of thanks for living in a country where even something as horrific as 9/11 could not weaken our spirit. This year, we would like to ask one more thing as a show of unity since we are still fighting with the enemy who caused the 9/11 tragedy. Would you display the flag for the day at your home, on your car, bike, or anywhere you can display Old Glory? Let's show our enemies that we can still unite in our love for our country.
You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando radio show.
Greetings, fellow deplorables. I felt a little offended in the last segment when Rick referred to himself as a deplorable and didn't include me. I had deplorable envy. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh, come on.
Well, George...
Where's the deplorable love for a deplorable like me? But
there's a whole bunch of them out there. There's about 48 million of them, George, so it's...
Oh, fair enough.
Not just
I'm in
you
good company then.
You're
well,
very
anyhow,
good
I just want to
company.
remind our listeners, if you want to hear a rebroadcast of today's show, check out our website, ccrsnetwork.com, ccrshow.com. At noon, you can log on to roarradio.net, and at 11 p.m., you can log on to highplainsdailynews.com. And with this phone number and your phone, you can always listen to Conservative Commandos. You don't need your computer, and you don't need a radio. 832-999-1199. We've got with us J.D. Gordon. He is... been regaling us with all kinds of important and interesting information for the last 15 minutes. We've got him for one more segment, so we've got a few minutes left with him. He is a former Pentagon spokesman. He served under Rumsfeld and Gates. He's a retired Navy commander. He has been working in a variety of think tanks as well on national security issues and foreign policy. He's advised people like President-elect Donald Trump, former vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin, and former presidential candidate Herman Cain. J.D. is also a member of Donald Trump's transition team. He's a columnist at Fox News, The Washington Times. You've seen him on television. You've heard him on the radio. He is an all-around good guy and an expert on important issues dealing with national security. J.D., we're glad to have you, and we thank you that you would stick with us over the break. So, you're on the transition team. Donald Trump has some time between now and the day he takes office. What do you see him doing so that he can have a fast start? You know, in a race, you some races you start from a standing start and the gun goes and you go, and then if you're in a relay race, you can actually have some momentum. So when you cross the line, you're already at full speed. So I'd like to borrow that analogy, and I'm hoping that he will use this time so that when he's inaugurated, he's going to be running at full speed from that moment and not getting up to speed and all the things, which means he's going to be super busy. I know he's going to take a day or two off, but that's probably all I can afford because there's a lot to be done. What do you see some of the key things that he'll be doing so that on Inauguration Day he has this fast start and is ready to start leading America back the way it needs to be?
Well, that's a great question, George. I would note that he's been running since last summer, so he's had about a year and a half to build policy ideas, to study on the issues, and so it's not just starting from day one, so to speak. So we had our Washington, D.C. policy office, which was pretty robust, started in the spring. I first briefed him in March. We had a very substantive discussion around the globe, and he's a very quick study, very quick learner, asks very intelligent questions. And so we've been working on this for a while. We've been working on policy ideas for quite some time on the campaign. The transition team has taken the ideas we formulated in the D.C. policy office and actually put them into what that would require to be passed into law or to be acted upon. So broad policy ideas and concepts are now getting the meat added, if you will. And so there's a 100-day plan, and then there's a 200-day plan. So when we unveil the 100-day plan, Americans are going to be very happy to see that it does include a robust national security and immigration elements to that, which we really need. And the second big piece of that is, in addition to turning those policies into actionable, how you make things work in America, then there's the cabinet selections. So right now, Mr. Trump is taking a look at who he wants in the cabinet as far as all of them, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, and he's going through different candidates right now. So when those are picked, once he gets inaugurated, typically what the goal is to have your cabinet head be confirmed by the Senate within a couple of weeks. So you're looking early February. Once that happens, the cabinet secretaries then are able to put in place a list of people that they're developing for who's going to be undersecretary, who's going to be assistant secretaries of the various cabinets. So I'd say that's primarily the two things. The first is the turning policy into practical application, number one, which is happening, and then number two, the selection of who's going to lead the government, who are going to be the secretaries serving under the Trump administration.
Talking about, JD, it was very interesting how you were talking about briefing, and I'll call him President-elect Trump. You know, finally we're going to get a man in Washington I can say president to, because I've avoided that word for the last 8 years. But now we're going to have a president in Washington. We've heard stories about Barack Obama and security briefings that he missed more than 60% of them. You, judging by your interactions with Donald Trump, with the briefings you have done with him, how different is Donald Trump?
Well, you know, he's very engaged in security briefings that I've been in with him, asked very insightful, intelligent questions, and he's a quick study. He remembers things. If you tell him something, he's going to remember, and he already has, I would say, a lot more worldly perspective in a lot of ways than President Obama had, because President Obama, remember when he was elected, he was a 40-something rookie senator who just voted president most of the time. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump's 70, and he's been a successful businessman. He's traveled around the world for decades and dealing with different people around the whole world from a business perspective. So, you know, I think he's a lot more of a seasoned leader than President Obama is. But, you know, we've got, at some point, we've got to make the transition, me too, to just being thankful for the service of people like President Obama and Secretary Clinton, because we got to heal the nation. Bottom line, I know I've been criticizing President Obama for 7+ years, and rightly so in my view. Yeah. When I left the Pentagon, I made a career out of being a columnist and commentator, and a lot of it was criticizing the policies of Barack Obama, which I thought were very harmful for America. But at the end of the day, Rick, we've got to make the transition now to make up with President Obama, Secretary Clinton, wish them well, thank them for their service, and move on. And it's hard to do. It's a tough habit for me to break, too.
J.D. Gordon, we always love having you on here on the Conservative Commandos radio show. You're always so generous with your time. Please tell our listeners how they can follow your work, read your articles.
Well, they can follow me on my website. It's protectamericatoday.com. It's my super PAC. And also, they can take a look at The Hill, The Daily Caller, Washington Times, and Fox News Jerusalem, my column archives.
J.D. Gordon, again, thank you so much. Take care. God bless.
Thanks, Rick and George. Take care. God bless.
And you are listening to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth and yours truly, Rick Trader. Let's call him the deplorable one. Let's call me President and CEO of Frontiers of Freedom. And we're coming to you live from the studios of the Conservative Commandos radio network at WNJC and around the world on the internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, AM, FM 24/7. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
I'm crazy. I really don't care. That's my prerogative. They say I'm nasty, but
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos radio network. We are establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired of the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos radio network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturdays from 2 to 6 p.m. on WNJC Radio, 1360 on your AM dial, or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our website, CCRSnetwork.com, for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where now even more newsmakers go to be heard.
Since 2011, we have been calling for a national commitment from all Americans to participate in an annual event to honor all of the victims and their families who suffered during and after the most devastating event to ever take place on American soil. We all remember those horrible scenes of destruction on September 11th, 2001 that unfolded right before our eyes, either up front or on television. We continue to ask every American to participate in the united action of prayer, which is simply to stop whatever you are doing at precisely 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. to either observe 1 minute of silence or to offer a prayer to honor the memory of those who were directly affected by this unforgettable scene of destruction. Please include a prayer of thanks for living in a country where even something as horrific as 9/11 could not weaken our spirit. This year, we would like to ask one more thing as a show of unity since we are still fighting with the enemy who caused the 9/11 tragedy. Would you display the flag for the day at your home, on your car, bike, or anywhere you can display Old Glory? Let's show our enemies that we can still unite in our love for our country.
You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando radio show.
Greetings, fellow deplorables. Your host, Rick Schrader and George Landreth, proudly both deplorables, welcome you back to the show. If you would like to hear a rebroadcast of our show, we encourage you to check out our website, CCRSnetwork.com and CCRshow.com. Also, at noon, you can log on to roarradio.net, and at 11 p.m., you can log on to highplainsdailynews.com. And with this number and a phone, you won't need an internet connection. You won't need a radio if you have this number and a phone, which is 832-999-1199. And with that, you can always listen to the Conservative Commando radio programming. We have our next guest, James Roberts. He is a friend of the show. He is also the president and at the American Studies Center. It's a nonprofit foundation. It was founded in the late 70s. It's currently headquartered in Arlington, Virginia. In 1985, Jim founded America Radio, a news talk network that is now has more than 400 affiliates nationwide and more than 5 million listeners. He also founded the American Veterans Center in 1995, an organization that honors the sacrifice and guards the legacy of America's veterans. Jim, welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show.
Good to be back with you. Thank you.
We have the problem of the veterans that has been not a new problem. When President Barack Obama was elected, he talked about it. He said he was going to fix it, the way our veterans were treated, the medical care they receive, all of that. Of course, it has not been fixed. It continues on. We periodically get updates and find that the same problems are often in existence at different places and so forth. So the question I have, I guess, is how can Veterans Day is upon us. How does this election affect veterans, do you think? Is there something is there some good news in this for us?
Oh, I think so. I think President-elect Trump has made it very clear that he highly values America's veterans and thinks they've been given a raw deal and has pledged to take steps to reverse that. And another opportunity presents itself with the repeal and replacement of Obamacare, because hopefully we will get a fundamental restructuring of our health care system in this country, which is not only bad under Obamacare, but it was bad before. And so I think we need to go back to basics with health care, basically privatize it, get rid of employer insurance, and go along with the Ryan plan of premium support. Each individual gets a voucher or something of that sort to pay for their own health care, or at least part of it, through the doctor, the hospital of their choice. Following on that, we can then integrate the VA system into this new overall health care plan, and implement something like Dr. Ben Carson has suggested, which is to give every veteran what he calls a gold card, which will enable them to get health care basically wherever they choose, and get rid of these huge bureaucracy-laden veterans hospitals. A lot of the VA hospitals have a lot of great people working in them, both paid and as volunteers, but they're huge bureaucracies, and they don't respond to economic incentives like a regular hospital would. So the doctors see far fewer patients than is normal in private hospital, et cetera, et cetera. So, yes, I think we have a golden opportunity here with the restructuring of our health care system, the replacement of Obamacare with something much better, to also take that opportunity to reform the health care system for our veterans.
Well, I think that's pretty darn good news. This has been a problem that strikes me as eminently fixable. It's one that we identified and yet have done nothing about. My sense is the reason why nothing got done is it was just not a high enough priority. It wasn't considered important enough, and so it wasn't fixed. And I agree with you. I think that almost a speech has not gone by, really, where Donald Trump hasn't talked about and mentioned this issue of our veterans and honoring them and treating them with respect. And part of that respect quite has to be that we take care of them. These are folks that have put their life on the line, put their well-being at risk to protect us. And when they are injured, we obviously owe them at least the very best care that we can possibly provide, as opposed to stringing them along and so forth. So I agree with you that this is a real opportunity. Now, Veterans Day is tomorrow.
That's right.
What is, you're committed to honoring their sacrifice and guarding their legacy. What should Americans do on Veterans Day? I mean, it's not quite as big a holiday as some of the others, in the sense that I suspect very few people will have off tomorrow. But maybe I'm wrong.
Right.
But how can we fulfill that? How do we honor that sacrifice and guard that legacy?
Well, if in no other way, stop, pause, and reflect for a few minutes on what our veterans have done. Maybe do some reading. Google. Google's a great mechanism for finding out contributions of veterans. Reflect, read up, and then say a prayer. And so make sure that at least a fraction of your Veterans Day is spent the way that it's supposed to be spent, which is honoring those who have served. And that's what I would say. Of course, if there are events, please participate in them. If there's a parade in your town or city, there's a huge one in New York, I know, and I'm sure there are parades many other places. There are probably events all over the country. I know there are, sponsored by the American Legion and the VFW and other patriotic groups, and participate in them as well. Send a check to a veterans organization of some kind. There are many different things. If you're a mom or dad with kids, sit with them at the dinner table and talk a bit about the veterans and what they've done to make our country possible in the first place, with George Washington and the very first veterans. That 7-year-long struggle that they underwent to establish the United States of America, and what veterans have done ever since then, when their countries called them. Veterans are servants of our country who have been called by our country to perform a duty, and they have answered the call, and they should be commended for that and should be honored for it. So if your children don't know very much about the military, and that's unfortunately the case all too often, do your part to educate them. And also, I would say, put some pressure on the schools where your children attend. Make sure that they do something in an organized way, either through the curriculum and or an assembly, something like that, where they have a veteran come in to speak. There's a program that one of the networks used to have called Take a Vet to School. That's a great idea. Take a veteran to school and have him or her speak to your class or maybe to the whole school. But there are all kinds of things that can be done, to honor our veterans.
Here on the Conservative Commandos radio show, we are speaking with James Roberts. He's the president of the American Studies Center. He's also one of the founders of the American Veterans Center. James, you just mentioned something that is kind of a sore subject with me, that more is not being done in the schools to teach kids about about our history, about the parts that our veterans have played in it. It kind of rubs me a little bit when I see schools that have a holiday on things like Veterans Day and Memorial Day, even 4th of July. I know that's in the summer, but I think those should be days of education rather than days to let kids out to wander the malls. I think that those days would be great opportunities to teach the kids about the veterans, about the country, about our history.
I couldn't agree more. The situation in most of our schools regarding history, American history in general, is woefully bad, woefully inadequate, woefully distorted in many cases in terms of the coverage that issues in our history get. So the military history and the veterans history is just part of that overall problem.
Hey, James, we have to take a 2-minute break. You understand the business. Could you hold on for us, please?
Sure.
And by the way, this is the 241st birthday of the Marine Corps, so we want to honor them too. But you are listening to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Lander, President and CEO of Frontiers of Freedom, and I'm Rick Trader, coming to you from the studios of the Conservative Commandos radio network here at WNJ's 1360, our flagship station in Philadelphia, and around the world on the internet with American Patriots Broadcasting, TalkStream Live, SHR Media, K98 Talk, iHeartRadio, AM, FM 24/7. Tomorrow is Veterans Day, and today we're speaking with James Roberts, President of the American Studies Center and the American Veterans Center. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
They say I'm nasty, but
The Conservative Commandos radio show is expanding to become the Conservative Commandos radio network. We are establishing a front line of conservative radio broadcasters and ironclad patriots to declare war against the madness of liberalism and the Obama administration. Are you tired of the disregard for our Constitution? Do you still have faith in the American dream? Are you looking for sensible, smart radio? If so, listen to the Conservative Commandos radio network every weekday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturdays from 2 to 6 p.m. on WNJC Radio, 1360 on your AM dial, or around the world on the internet at WNJCradio.com. Check out our website, CCRSnetwork.com, for rebroadcasts and network updates. We are the Conservative Commandos Radio Network, where now even more newsmakers go to be heard.
Since 2011, we have been calling for a national commitment from all Americans to participate in an annual event to honor all of the victims and their families who suffered during and after the most devastating event to ever take place on American soil. We all remember those horrible scenes of destruction on September 11th, 2001 that unfolded right before our eyes, either up front or on television. We continue to ask every American to participate in the united action of prayer, which is simply to stop whatever you are doing at precisely 9 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. to either observe 1 minute of silence or to offer a prayer to honor the memory of those who are directly affected by this unforgettable scene of destruction. Please include a prayer of thanks for living in a country where even something as horrific as 9/11 could not weaken our spirit. This year, we would like to ask one more thing as a show of unity since we are still fighting with the enemy who caused the 9/11 tragedy. Would you display the flag for the day at your home, on your car, bike, or anywhere you can display Old Glory? Let's show our enemies that we can still unite in our love for our country.
You can call the Conservative Commandos radio show at 856-227-1360. Your opinion counts at 856-227-1360.
This is Congressman Alan West, and you're listening to the Conservative Commando radio show.
Greetings, fellow deplorables. This is the Conservative Commandos radio program. Your host today, Rick Trader, and yours truly, George Landreth. We fancy ourselves completely and utterly deplorable, at any rate. We are also glad to have with us James Roberts. Before I get back to James, I just want to remind folks that you can always hear a rebroadcast of our show. If you'd like to, just check out our website, ccrsnetwork.com, ccrshow.com. You can also, at noon, log on to roarradio.net at 11 p.m. They will have posted up the new show, most recent show, at highplainsdailynews.com. And with this number and your phone, you can always listen to the Conservative Commandos, even when you don't have your computer with you or you're not near a radio. 832-999-1199. Alrighty, we have James Roberts, who is both the, well, not both, it can be a long list of things, actually. He's the president of the American Studies Center. He is also, he founded the Radio America, which is a news talk network that has now more than 400 affiliates nationwide, more than 5 million listeners, and he is also the founder of American Veterans Center, which works to honor and the sacrifice and guard the legacy of America's veterans. We're glad to have Jim with us, and we've been talking about how this election will impact veterans. And we've also been talking about some of the ways we can honor our veterans on Veterans Day, which, of course, is tomorrow, November 11th. I wanted to shift gears a little bit because you have written an article that I thought was kind of interesting. We often think of veterans as their primary contribution to our country is that they put themselves in harm's way to protect us. And I don't mean to suggest that's not a big deal. That's a huge big deal. But you've written an article that implies that there are some other ways that veterans continue to serve their country even after the battle is over.
Right. What I suggested in my op-ed piece, which is going to be published in the Weekly Caller, is that in a divided country such as we have today, that veterans can provide a real source of unity. I remember back to the 70s. I'm a Vietnam veteran myself, and I remember the deplorable way that a lot of Vietnam vets were treated by the public. And much of the public didn't like the war, and they conflated the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who were fighting the war with the policy, which was, of course, massively misguided and misimplemented from Washington. But the military who were bleeding and dying in Vietnam were answering the country's call again and doing what their civilian leadership was asking them to do. So I thought that was a terrible tragedy and truly deplorable, as the word you used that I heard during the break. But the good news is that
but in this case, actually deplorable. We're not mocking Hillary in that case. I mean, what you're really talking about is the actual meaning of the word, which is to treat America's heroes that put their life on the line, that put themselves in harm's way to protect their country, even when the civilian leadership messes up the policy. That doesn't diminish their sacrifice, their commitment. And when they come home for them to be spit upon, to be ridiculed and called names, is nothing if not completely and utterly deplorable.
Well said indeed. And I was about to mention that the good news is that since the days of Vietnam, that situation has changed markedly for the better. As you know, we're still really in the midst of conflicts in the Middle East, in Iraq and Afghanistan. These policies, especially the Iraq incursion, were very unpopular with a big segment of the public. But unlike Vietnam, you did not see the returning servicemen and women being punished for this. You look in the Congress now, we had a congressional resolution that we got introduced in Congress 3 years ago, honoring all those who had served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it was unanimously adopted. And some of the co-sponsors included people like Bernie Sanders and Nancy Pelosi. In this day and age, everybody at least says that they honor our military and our veterans. And that's a good thing. I mean, when you see soldiers returning from deployment who walk through airports, people stand up and cheer, and they say thank you for your service, that kind of thing.
Right.
Give up seats, and that's a great thing. So our country has
and pick up the tab for them at a restaurant, which I always think is a cool thing. And picking up the tab for them at a restaurant, which I think is kind of a cool thing to do.
Absolutely. And so that's
just kind of anonymously call the waiter or waitress over and say, I'd like to pay their bill.
That's right. And all the polls show that in terms of line of work, the military is at the very top or near the very top as our policemen and firemen and doctors and a few other categories. But the military is at the very top now, whereas 40 years ago it was toward the bottom. So we as a country, as a people, have improved in that respect, and we should note that.
Hey, George, can I jump in for a minute and ask Jim a question? Jim, this is off topic. Maybe, George, you'll want to chime in this, too. Jim, I'm watching how America is going. I mean, our college campuses, in my opinion, are disgraceful. With everything that's going on, and kids today are not learning discipline. They're not learning it in home. They're not learning it in school. In fact, it's the inmates are running the asylum in school.
That's right.
My wife was a teacher for 33 years. I heard it every day. Do you think it's time to bring back the draft? Because discipline is going out the window in this country. Maybe that's a place where discipline can be returned to our younger people.
Well, I have to disagree on that. The draft was in place during Vietnam, or most of it anyway, and that was a big part of the contentiousness of the war. I'm a believer in freedom wherever possible, that we should have a maximum amount of freedom. I'm all for military service. I've served myself, and I encourage others to do so also. If you don't want to serve in the military, serve in some volunteer capacity, but I think it should be voluntary rather than compulsory. And again, I go back to the Veterans Hospital situation and these enormous bureaucracies. And to do a draft, you're talking about millions of young people who will be put into the military, and God knows what they would be asked to do. I mean, we have a military now that's too small. It needs to be enlarged some and modernized, but it's the finest we've ever had, and that's the case. The reason for that is that it's a voluntary military, in my opinion. So I'm all for voluntary service. I think on the college front, what needs to happen is a lot of parents need to yank the tuition payments at these institutions until they shape up, because you're absolutely right. The situation on these campuses is just disgusting. Money is being wasted by the billions. The kids are not learning anything. They're learning the wrong things, actually, with these safe zones and all of this other nonsense. It's just disgusting to me. But I think the parents who are paying, whatever, some of these highly regarded universities, parents are paying $60,000 a year for their son or daughter to get no education and to learn the wrong life lessons. And so I think there should be an organized effort on the part of parents around this country to do something about it by using their pocketbooks.
One of the things I might add, I can remember talking with Donald Rumsfeld when he was Secretary of Defense about this very issue. And he pointed out that he thought that having the draft would actually make our military less prepared. He says our military, the draft was more needed when technology was different, and you basically you had these large infantry groups. And you just hand them a gun, you give them some training, you kind of storm a hill or those kinds of things. He said our military today is so specialized and so highly trained and has such special equipment that he said actually having a professional military where they make it a career, they volunteer, they stick with it for year after year, and become these very highly trained. American soldiers are better than every other nation's soldiers, and it's not because we're genetically better. It's because we provide them with better tools and better training. And his point was it's hard to train people when you only have them for a year or two, which is what a draft provides. But when they make this their avocation, then they become just these phenomenal soldiers that can do these amazing things. So he, from just a perspective of having a military that could accomplish what he wanted it to accomplish, and he said it was. I understand your point, though. I agree that we need to do something about the level of discipline and the level of commitment and even patriotism in our country from the coming generation. But he would argue that that would probably come at a cost of a military that's less capable. I don't know if you agree with that, Jim, or not, but I just throw that in. That's something that
I generally agree with that, and that's what I was saying. If we reinstitute the draft and increase the size of the military by several million people, which is what would happen, what would they do? Because right now we have a relatively small military, but they are professional, and they're dealing in, as you pointed out, with highly technologically advanced systems that take a lot of training. And if you get these young people in for a year, you can't do much with them. And so that's a big part of the problem that I have. And it's probably not going to be a good experience for them if they're out raking leaves or doing calisthenics or whatever, because there simply isn't much for them to do at this point. When we had the draft in World War II, there were 16 million men and 1 or 2 million women in uniform. But we were.
Well, that was a different war, too.
It was a different war. We were facing vast needs for personnel all over the world, in Asia as well as Europe.
Absolutely.
And the situation simply is not the case anymore.
Jim, we're up against the clock, but I don't want to interrupt you, but we're up against the clock, and we've got to end. But I wanted to give you just a split second to tell folks how they can follow the work that you do. What's the best way?
Coming up on this Sunday, the 13th, we've got 2 programs on cable television. We have American Valor, a salute to our heroes, will be on the American Heroes channel from 8 to 10 in the morning, and will be repeated later. I don't know the exact times for that. And it will be on the Reels Network at 11 o'clock. So two cable networks there. American History channel from 8 to 10, Reels from 11 to 1, and then on Fox Business at noon we have a 1-hour program called The Wounded Warrior Experience, which everyone who watches will find very, very inspirational, I'm sure.
Thank you, Jim. We've got to go. To our listeners, tune in tomorrow. We'll have more stuff for you. There's important things to always talk about. Remember, freedom is worth defending. Never, ever take off a vacation on that question.
Keep up the good work, guys. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Jim.